Good evening and welcome to our webinar entitled Navigating Neighborhood Councils and the Cannabis Regulation Commission, hosted by the City of Los Angeles's Department of Cannabis Regulation. My name is Frank Louie with the NSA team, and I will be the moderator for tonight's event. We are here tonight because the Department of Cannabis Regulation has officially launched the Business Licensing and Compliance Assistance, or BLC program, to assist equity entrepreneurs in the City of Los Angeles with obtaining a commercial cannabis license and operating a successful cannabis business. This series is part of broader BLC program efforts, which also include live webinars with different subject matter experts, networking events to connect with other LA businesses and industry leaders, checklists, worksheets, and other management tools you can download and use, self-directed online education on important topics related to running a successful cannabis business through the BLC's learning management system, which is usually referred to as the LMS for verified social equity individuals, and a robust coaching program that connects applicants with seasoned cannabis subject matter experts. We will drop a link in the chat now to sign up for these coaching services. Now for the fun and networking part. Please RSVP to the LA Cannabis Unite event at the beautiful Mayfair Hotel on June 17th. The afternoon of this event will feature a supply chain speed dating from 3 to 5 p.m. So you ask, what is this? The goal is to have social equity brands or products on dispensary shelves. Equity operators will have the opportunity to meet with the cannabis industry distributors and brands for the chance to pitch their businesses to industry decision makers. Supply chain speed dating is a great way to meet people, crucial to expanding your network and getting your product to consumers. From 5 p.m., the rooftop area will feature a DJ, food, and networking. A no-host bar will be available in the lobby, along with free professional headshots and full access to the DCR resources room. Please use the registration link that we are dropping in the chat now to RSVP for this amazing event. As part of the city's social equity program, DCR has launched the BLC Learning Management System for verified social equity individuals, where you now have access to these recorded webinars and online courses and digital resources made especially for you. Before we get started, let's take a moment to review some housekeeping rules. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and can be viewed after the editing process on the Learning Management System. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available during this session. You will be able to see and hear all the panelists, however. There is an open chat box where you can interact with one another for networking or comment on the information, but please use caution when sharing personal information in a public forum and keep your questions focused on tonight's topic. And please ask questions about tonight's subject in the Q&A box. We are gathering and responding to these questions throughout the presentation. We'll have a dedicated Q&A session in the last 10 to 15 minutes of tonight's event. You are encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen. If you use the Q&A box for questions, everyone can see the answers to your questions. And if you have this question, many other folks likely do as well. And finally, please note that tonight's content was not created by the Department of Cannabis Regulation or the City of Los Angeles and is for informational purposes only. This information is subject to change and does not replace or supersede the Los Angeles Municipal Code nor constitute legal advice. If you have specific questions outside of tonight's topic, please call 213-978-0738 during business hours to speak to a DCR representative. Now let's transition to the presentation. I am pleased to announce that tonight we will have two presenters for tonight's webinar. Here is a brief bio of both of our presenters. I'm pleased to introduce a special guest presenter for tonight's webinar to provide the overview of the Cannabis Regulation Commission portion of the webinar, Commissioner Robert Ahn, the president of the LA Cannabis Regulation Commission. Robert was appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti in 2017 to the Cannabis Regulation Commission and was elected by the commission to serve as its inaugural president. In this capacity, he oversees the Department of Cannabis Regulation for all licensing, regulations, and policy for the legal cannabis market in the city of Los Angeles. Robert regularly advises government entities, elected officials, and industry groups on cannabis policy and reform. Also a former planning commissioner for the city of Los Angeles from 2013 through 17. Robert is an attorney specializing in real estate transactions and land use matters. He advises investors and developers on land use projects, providing unique insights and strategic advice with regard to entitlements across all asset types. He has represented clients in a variety of real estate transactions, such as acquisitions and dispositions, financing, commercial leasing, joint venture transactions, and entity formation and structuring. Robert received his BBA from Emory University and his JD from the University of Southern California Law School. And our other presenter tonight is Courtney Lang. Courtney is a California-based consultant specializing in cannabis real estate, licensing, and business development. She partners with businesses and leadership to build the foundation of a successful company. In addition to her cannabis background, Courtney offers her clients over 10 years of experience working in the natural foods industry for several small to medium-sized companies. We'll be starting the presentation tonight with Courtney Lang. Welcome, Courtney. Feel free to start sharing your screen and your presentation, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank, for the introduction, and hello and welcome to all of our guests this evening. Tonight's webinar is part of a series on how to apply for a commercial cannabis license with the Department of Cannabis Regulation in the city of LA. I have had the pleasure of presenting quite a few webinars in part of this series, and all of them touched on the application procedures. So this is my last stop on the series, and this is also the last stop on your local licensing process. So what we've done to get you here is, or what you've done before you get to this point in the licensing process is, number one, you've picked which license type you want to operate. You've registered your personal and business account on the DCR licensing portal. You have found a location and submitted a pre-application with the DCR and made sure that your location is compliant. You've either submitted your annual or temporary license application with the Department of Cannabis Regulation, and you have passed your initial inspection. So those are all the steps that you'll have passed and completed prior to getting to this part of the licensing process, which is navigating neighborhood councils and the Cannabis Regulation Commission. So let's talk about what our agenda is for the evening. First, I'm going to do a high-level overview, make sure that we know we've got the target audience here tonight listening in. I'll also give a brief overview of the purpose and takeaway for this webinar. Next, our special guest, Commissioner Ahn, is going to review the Cannabis Regulation Commission and the public hearing that you'll be required to conduct for your license application. I'll then come back in, talk about neighborhood councils, who they are, and what you're going to be required to do with your local neighborhood council. We'll do some recommendations and resources on how to work with these two groups, and then we will open it up for a question and answer portion. So jumping into our introduction, I want to make sure that before we start, we make sure that you understand the intended audience for tonight's webinar. So the process of working with neighborhood councils and the Cannabis Regulation Commission only applies to, number one, annual applications, right? So if you're a temporary application, you're not quite there yet, but when you transition to an annual application, this process will apply to you, but only, again, if you are a storefront retailer or if you are a micro business with on-site sales. So this, again, the process of engaging your neighborhood council and the Cannabis Regulation Commission will apply to you when you have applied for your annual application for a storefront retailer or a micro business with on-site sales. In terms of other license types, other annual applications, there is a different process for the DCR to approve or deny annual applications for all other commercial cannabis activity. Moving on to tonight's purpose, the webinar purpose is to familiarize participants with the role of neighborhood councils and the Cannabis Regulation Commission, as well as the hearings for cannabis-related license applications. So you may ask, what is the role of neighborhood councils and the CRC? The Cannabis Regulation Commission guides the direction of LA's cannabis policy and makes recommendations to the city council and mayor. The Cannabis Regulation Commission holds hearings related to issuing licenses to applicants for cannabis-related activity in the city. And the neighborhood councils weigh in on policy direction and may provide public input related to issuing licenses. So important to know, again, the Cannabis Regulation Commission is going to be responsible for holding hearings related to issuing storefront retail licenses, as well as micro business with on-site sales, and neighborhood councils can weigh in on that decision. Briefly, what cannabis application procedure will involve your neighborhood council and the Cannabis Regulation Commission? The first one will be within 10 days of receipt of the notice of complete application for an annual license application. You'll be required to meet with your local neighborhood council. Again, once you have received the notice of complete application, it's important to know that you'll get this when you have submitted your paper documents for your temporary approval or your annual license application. Once they have been reviewed and you've passed your initial inspection, you'll get what's called a notice to complete. 10 days after you get the notice of complete application is when you'll be required to reach out to your neighborhood council and request a meeting. 45 days after receipt of the notice of complete application of an annual license application, you'll be required to have a community meeting, which is hosted by the DCR. And this is where stakeholders and landowners will have an opportunity to comment on your application. Within 90 days of the sending of the notice of complete application of an annual license application, Cannabis Regulation Commission public hearing will be scheduled. So the bottom line for tonight's webinar, we want to make sure that we ensure success when working with these groups. And like I said, we'll have our special guest, Commissioner Robert Ahn, talking about the Cannabis Regulation Commission, and I'll talk about the Neighborhood Council. And the recommendation here is to make sure that you meet with these two groups or attend regular meetings to build relationships with the decision makers and influencers, inform and educate yourself about the role and goals of your specific neighborhood council and the Cannabis Regulation Commission, and find common ground between your project and the neighborhood council. You want to align your goals for your project with them. So next, what we're going to do here is I'm going to hand the microphone over to Commissioner Ahn, who will take us through the section on the Cannabis Regulation Commission. Welcome, Commissioner Ahn.
Thank you, Courtney. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and want to welcome everyone that's listening and watching from home. The goal of today is to really just give you an overview of the process that's to come, and really to demystify to the extent that we can, in particular, the Cannabis Commission and the related public hearings. And ultimately, our goal is to give you that information to hopefully get you as most prepared as you possibly can to ensure your success when the time comes to come before the commission. Now, let me give you a brief overview about the commission and who we are. First, we are a 5-member commission and we're appointed by the mayor. Our terms are for 4 years on a staggered basis. And generally, what we do is we oversee the Department of Cannabis Regulation. We make recommendations to the mayor, the city council, regarding city laws and ordinances and regulations pertaining to cannabis-related actions within the city. And the public hearings that we are referring to, we hold them as part of the annual licensing. And that is where you will get your approvals, but it's also an opportunity for folks from the city and the stakeholders in the relevant jurisdiction to make their opinions be known and to speak on either in opposition to or in favor of the application. What cannabis application procedures will involve the CRC? So the first step would be the community meetings. DCR shall conduct a community meeting via video or telephone conferencing within the defined geographic area, which the business premises is situated. It's at this meeting that DCR will accept written and oral testimony regarding the application and then prepare a written report to this Cannabis Regulation Commission. It's at this point that we will generally get a summary of all the testimony, whether it's in favor of or against the application. And that's really the opportunity for the community and stakeholders to come in and let their opinions be known. But I want to also point out that that is not the only opportunity, because within 90 days of sending the notice of complete application of an annual licensing application, that is when the Cannabis Regulation Commission will conduct its public hearing. And it's at this time that the DCR shall either deny the issuance of the annual license or make a recommendation to the CRC to grant the license. If the decision by DCR is to recommend approval, that is when we'll have a public hearing. So just to clarify a point here, if DCR determines based on the evidence and the findings that it's appropriate for a denial, the matter will not go to the public hearing and it will not come before the Cannabis Regulation Commission. However, if DCR deems that based on the analysis, based on the findings and the evidence, that a recommendation for approval is appropriate, that is when the application will move forward and come before the Cannabis Regulation Commission. At this time, we'll conduct a general public hearing and allow for input from the public. So at this point, I want to talk a little bit more about the details and what to expect from the CRC hearing itself. The commission holds a public hearing to consider a recommendation by the DCR to issue the license sought by the applicant. But prior to this step, the DCR may also submit written reports summarizing its recommendations, its analysis, and also the applicant and members of the public can also provide and submit written materials. And usually those materials are assembled and then copies are provided to the commissioners prior to the hearing for our review. Now, when we get to the hearing, the commission will provide the applicant or at sometimes it's authorized representatives, whether it's a consultant or an attorney. We usually provide up to 10 minutes for the applicant team to make an oral presentation regarding its application. The commission may also ask a member of the department to testify at the hearing and provide its analysis and its findings as well. And finally, the commission will provide an opportunity to the general public to comment. And again, it's at this time that depending on the location and the geography and the neighborhood, there could be a fair amount of public comment that's provided depending on how controversial a certain applicant or application may be. But this is also the applicant's opportunity to do its community outreach and also provide testimony from the public that may be in favor of or in support of its application. So that's a really important step in the process, and I would encourage you to do so. So the commission itself can take 3 different courses of action. First would be an actual commission action, which is a decision adopted by a majority of the commission. In our commission and most commissions, actually, it requires 3 votes. After a motion is made and seconded, those who are present can make a vote at the roll call. And in the event a member that's present fails to vote either yes or no, that member shall be deemed to have voted yes, and the member's vote shall be so recorded. We also have an action called reconsideration, where a commission can make a motion to reconsider a commission action on items listed on the agenda at the same meeting as the original action. And finally, there are instances where the commission may continue a particular item for a stated purpose to a future date. And this continuance may come at the request of staff. It can come at the request of city council office, for instance, or it can also just come from the commission, depending on the situation. There's also a legal time frame within which the commission must act. So going back to commission actions, the first possibility that can happen is that the commission can deny the issuance of the license, and the denial will be based on reasons stated in the LAMC section 104.04. And it must be based upon written findings and the evidence in the record. The decision to deny the issuance of a license is final and is effective upon the close of a 15 calendar day appeal period. So this is important because there is also an appeal period within the 15 calendar days. If an applicant is denied, they can appeal the matter to the city council. And it's at that point where the city council will then weigh in and decide to either uphold the denial or to overrule and approve. Now, the other commission action is the commission may approve the issuance of the license based on the written findings and evidence in the record. The other important thing here to note is that the commission may impose additional conditions to address public safety concerns based on findings and evidence in the record. I think a good example of that would be if we hear overwhelming evidence and testimony from, for instance, the neighbors. There could be a lot of loitering, there could be a lot of noise complaints. Usually they tend to be based on claims surrounding nuisance. In those instances, the commission is able to impose additional conditions to help mitigate some of those circumstances based on the testimony. So it's really important that you do the community outreach beforehand. And that's really how I want to end my presentation, is to really encourage all the applicants to, of course, you have to go through the neighborhood council process, but whenever possible, and in particular, if you know you're in a sensitive location, to go above and beyond and do the requisite community outreach so that you can establish those relationships with stakeholders, understand what issues there might be surrounding your business and your operations, and to really nip it in the bud, get ahead of it as far as you can prior to the commission hearing, so that you can address any of those concerns and you're not blindsided when we get to the commission and the public hearing related thereto. And so with that, I just want to just encourage you to stay active, stay engaged, and to continue to know the details of the process to ensure your success. And certainly the first step in that process is going to be the neighborhood council process, but also any community outreach that you can do above and beyond that, I think will be to your benefit. And so I just want to wish everyone good luck. And with that, Courtney, I want to turn it back to you for the neighborhood council section of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. That was really helpful. And it is a good seg into the next session about neighborhood councils. Well, everyone, you've heard quite a bit about the hearing process, which is certainly very important. And prior to getting your Cannabis Regulation Commission hearing scheduled, you'll be required to meet with your neighborhood council, or at least reach out to them and see if they are interested in meeting with you about your application. And so the goal for you as an applicant when it comes to the neighborhood council will be to make sure that you get the support from your neighborhood council for the approval of your cannabis license application. In order to do so, it's important for you to know a little bit more about the neighborhood councils. So let's start with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, also known as DUN. Neighborhood councils are supported by this department. DUN's mission is to promote civic engagement and make government more responsive to local needs by supporting neighborhood councils throughout the city of LA. DUN supports neighborhood councils by providing workshops and trainings on public engagement, meeting support and capacity building for committee members, and providing administrative support to the councils specifically. So basically, neighborhood councils are the closest form of government to the people. So you see here by this diagram, you've got on your right-hand side, federal government, and all the way at the bottom, you've got the neighborhood councils. And people. And so this is where the community members really get to engage and interact with the city of LA's government and have representation when it comes to lawmaking and development of the city neighborhoods. The neighborhood councils, there are 99 total. Together, they form the grassroots level of Los Angeles city government. Each council is composed of volunteer elected officials who sit on boards to monitor the delivery of city services to their community. It's important to know that many of the board members move on to larger roles within the city. So some may become elected officials, while others may have a role as a staff member with the city. Earlier in the presentation, we took a look at the different application procedures that are going to involve the Neighborhood Council and the Cannabis Regulation Commission. There's specifically one here that is going to be important for neighborhood councils, whereby within 10 days of receipt of the notice of complete application for an annual license application, the applicant or a designated representative shall contact the neighborhood council and offer to appear before the neighborhood council to address questions about the application. The applicant shall provide written evidence to DCR that the applicant offered to appear before the relevant neighborhood council to address questions about the application. This information will then become part of your application record, and it will be included in the DCR's report to the Cannabis Regulation Commission. So again, once you've submitted your annual license application and you have passed your inspection, you'll receive what's called the notice of complete application. Once you receive that, you have 10 days to reach out to the neighborhood council. So it is a short window you'll have to reach out to the neighborhood council. So obviously it's important that you make sure you find out who your neighborhood council is before you submit your annual application or before you get to this end point, right? You want to know who they are ahead of time. You want to have their contact information ready to go. And in fact, what I recommend with some folks is, depending on, again, the neighborhood and your constituents, it might be really beneficial for you to attend a neighborhood council meeting as a community member, just to start to familiarize yourself with the meetings and the board and the community members. And you may go as far as to schedule something before you do your official meeting that's part of your application process, and familiarize folks with your project, with the cannabis rules and regulations, and that will help you obviously achieve your mission of getting neighborhood council support. In terms of the neighborhood council, if you'll request to have a meeting where you appear before your local neighborhood council. And so what's the process from there? So first, obviously, you're going to need to find your relevant neighborhood council that serves the community in which your business premise is located. Number two, contact your neighborhood council, offer to appear before the council to address questions about your application. Number three, if the neighborhood council accepts your request, a hearing will be scheduled for your project. And number four, during the hearing, applicants will be asked to provide a mini presentation and answer questions. So not all neighborhood councils will accept the request to present, but I would definitely anticipate it happening and anticipate you needing to do this mini presentation. But like I said, some may not answer the request. But that doesn't mean that they may or may not have comments for you when it comes to the Cannabis Regulation Commission. They are still able to provide testimony at your Cannabis Regulation Commission public hearing. They can also submit a written testimony prior to your hearing if they don't actually attend the hearing and make a comment. So just note that just because you may be in the situation where your neighborhood council doesn't answer to your request to appear before them, it doesn't mean that they can't actively participate in the other parts of your process, your hearing process with the Cannabis Regulation Commission. So as you can imagine, the neighborhood council support is crucial, and it may take more than one meeting. As we mentioned, this meeting that's required by the DCR after you receive the notice of complete application, that's what counts towards your application, but you can have meetings up to, you can have meetings prior to the official meeting. And I think it's really important to do so, to garner their support. But for now, let's move on, and we will discuss some recommendations on not only just working with the neighborhood councils, but working with the Cannabis Regulation Commission. So to summarize this evening's webinar, you've got to obviously have your number one, your hearing or a request to have a hearing with your neighborhood council. Then following that meeting, you'll have the DCR will host a community meeting with constituents in the area that your business premise is located. Both reports from the neighborhood council and from the community meeting will be made part of your application record. That'll be submitted to the Cannabis Regulation Commission as part of your public hearing. And then the third part is that you'll have your Cannabis Regulation Committee hearing. This application process, just as a reminder, it only applies to annual applications for storefront retail and micro business with on-site sales. So all that being said, some recommendations here. Obviously, when it comes to the Cannabis Regulation Committee and the Neighborhood Council, it's really important that you attend meetings and familiarize yourself with the people and the processes. Every neighborhood council is different, so you want to make sure you find your neighborhood council and attend the meetings prior to. For both of these meetings, if you can, it would be really helpful to meet with individuals who serve on the neighborhood council or the CRC ahead of the required meetings in an effort to build rapport and to get to know each other. This is certainly a helpful tool and tactic. Also, when you're preparing your presentation, to have conversations with those who serve on the board, you're really able to understand some of the issues that will come up ahead of time, so you can prepare your presentation and talking points accordingly. In terms of the neighborhood council, a recommendation here is inform the neighborhood council and its constituents about cannabis regulations. Many of them have not read the policies and do not understand the rules and operating requirements that differentiate illegal operators from legal operators. So what do I mean by that? This is what I mean by the preparation with your stakeholders and neighborhood council ahead of time. Obviously, the Cannabis Regulation Committee knows the rules and regulations. They've helped to author them, but the neighborhood councils are not as familiar with legal cannabis operations in the city of LA and what the operating requirements are. So you want to find a way to inform them on a friendly basis about what it means to be a legal operator in the city of LA. So moving on to the next point, this really goes into what items you want to focus on when you're educating the public about cannabis policies. So the public is typically concerned with crime, public safety, odor, public health, sales to minors. So things like traffic, that all are items that the neighborhood council would be considering when they are talking about your project or meeting about your project. So letting them know what the requirements are, the security requirements are, is important. Letting them know what your odor plans are is important. Letting them know about all of the operating procedures that you have in place to make sure that the product is safe. Those kinds of items, I think, are really good talking points and good information to share with the neighborhood councils and stakeholders ahead of time. So just a couple of recommendations we wanted to give you before we wrapped up this presentation. And Before we move on to the Q&A really quickly, I want to highlight a couple of resources that are out there for you that can help you go a little bit deeper into these topics. So the first one is the Cannabis Regulation Commission rules and operating procedures. So we did a very high level overview of the Cannabis Regulation Commission process for hearings. You can find more information on the rules and operating procedures document linked here. The second link is for the Cannabis Regulation Commission info. This is where you'll find general information on the Cannabis Regulation Commission. And you'll see who the members are. You'll see where you can find more information about meetings. Next would be find your neighborhood council here. Obviously, there's 99 neighborhood councils, so it's very important for you to understand, based on your business premise location, which neighborhood council serves your business's community. And so this link here will bring you to a page for finding your neighborhood council. And the fourth resource we're sharing here is neighborhood council workshops and training resources. This is where you can find workshops and trainings. They're mostly recorded already, and where you can find slides and you can find video recordings and some other resources linked out for a bunch of different topics. So that being said, I wanted to give an opportunity to jump over to the Q&A section for tonight's webinar. So we're looking forward to participants asking questions, and Frank's going to help moderate this portion.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney. Lots of great information. We have a few questions, but I want to just kind of get some maybe some additional kind of guidance to those that are watching. So, I mean, I've had the opportunity to attend a lot of these throughout the state, whether it's the city council or commission or the neighborhood councils. And most of us don't have experience working with government, putting together effective slides and presentations, and communicating effectively. I mean, and it's also very challenging and maybe nerve-wracking, right? To go forward in front of these organizations. And what's your advice? I mean, how do people get ready and prepared? I mean, it's quite a challenge, I know.
Yeah, I do think that it depends on the applicant's initiative to do outreach prior to the hearings. So like we've said, Commissioner Onstead and I did as well, you want to become familiar with your neighborhood council and the members that serve on them, as well as the Cannabis Regulation Commission. And so just by attending meetings, whether they talk about cannabis or not, you'll start to hear key terms that are used around public safety, around nuisances, and obviously with your neighborhood council particularly, you'll really get a local taste for what is being talked about. And so you want to make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with those commissions, with the issues that they're trying to address specifically, so that you can then prepare your presentation and your talking points accordingly. But to me, it really just comes down to preparation, and I get more comfortable the more I go to the meetings and I hear the jargon and acronyms, and I just am able to do some research. A lot of times there's just digging and doing research after these meetings too, that helps out. All of the commission meeting notes and neighborhood council notes are available online. So it's really helpful to go to those meetings and hear it, the verbal testimony, but then to go back and read it sometimes too is just another way to digest it. And sometimes there's obviously reports and presentations that you can download too. So digesting that information in as many ways as possible, not just through attending, is also helpful.
Yeah, the great advice, and I think you're right. Just getting familiar, not related to the topic or the industry, but the process, right?
Yeah.
So great advice. And then I also know that I know in the commission that you have 10 minutes, and I don't know if the neighborhood council have a time frame, but or a time limit, but making sure you're within that time limit is super critical, right?
Yeah, definitely preparing ahead of time and presenting it, doing a test run would be really helpful to make sure that you're within that time frame, and obviously practicing the material just makes you speak smoother, right?
Right.
So you do have 10 minutes for the Cannabis Regulation Committee or Commission. And then for the neighborhood council, it's really, you got to check with your neighborhood council and get that information in terms of how long they'll give you to present.
Yep. Great. Okay, let's go through a few of these questions. Where and when does the CRC meet?
The Cannabis Regulation Commission, so the meetings are held at City Hall, which is on Spring Street. And so that's the location that the meetings are held. They are also on the first and third Thursday of the month at 2:00 p.m. So again, commission meetings, they're open to the public. Regular meetings are held at City Hall, which is on Spring Street, and they're held on the first and third Thursday of the month at 2:00 p.m.
Great. And I don't know, are they back live? Can you still go, can you walk in and,
So it
or are they
depends.
still doing them online?
Yeah, the commission meetings are done virtually.
Okay.
And I'm not 100% sure if all of them are done
Okay.
just virtually or if you can attend in public.
So like all of our cities, you got to make sure
Yeah.
you're aware of those notices and changes, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Another question that's come in: what are the neighborhood council trainings about, and can I attend one?
Yes. So the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, which serves the neighborhood councils, they have council trainings and resources available. And they've developed basically onboarding programs tailored to support successful neighborhood council board participation and management. These programs are tailored for board members, but they are available to people that are new to the council system. So there's a website that we linked on the resource page. And if you go there, there's probably 9 trainings available. And so what they have is they've got a recording, they have a PowerPoint, and then they have resources for each of those 9 trainings. And the topics that they'll discuss is really the purpose and role of the citywide neighborhood council system. There's other that talk about plans and guides for working with the system. There's some about basically agendas, how the agendas are set. There's also ones that talk about the legal framework of the neighborhood council. So there's a lot. It's kind of like they're 101 classes on a bunch of different topics when it comes to the neighborhood council. So not all of them will be pertinent to attendees on today's webinar, but you can pick and choose which ones you want to listen in on. And like I said, there's pre-recordings, there's a presentation, and then there's resources for each accordingly.
Okay. And then clarify, how do I get on the agenda if I want to make a presentation? Do I make a phone call? I mean, what's that process?
Yeah, so you'll need to contact your specific neighborhood council. So you can find contact information for each of them on the Done web page. And so each of them have a different process or a different contact person in order to schedule a hearing. So again, the best way to figure out how to get onto the neighborhood council agenda is to find out who your neighborhood council is. There will be a contact person available on the webpage for your neighborhood council. And so you'll want to reach out to them and see how to get on the agenda.
Okay. And this is a short question. Hopefully, I think it's maybe self-explanatory. When is a CRC hearing required by?
So it's actually good that you asked this question, or that somebody asked this question, because I don't think we hit on this enough, but the Cannabis Regulation Commission hearing is going to be required during the annual application process for storefront retailer and micro business with on-site sales. And it's the last step in the process, right? So like I've said, you've you've already submitted your annual license application and you've had the paperwork portion of it reviewed and you've passed your initial inspection, the last step will be to have your hearing with the Cannabis Regulation Commission. And so most folks that are applying for a storefront retailer or micro business, if you haven't already applied for it today, you're going to be applying for an annual license. And so whenever you reach the point in which you've passed your initial inspection and you've reached the notice of complete application, that's when you're going to be required to do the Cannabis Regulation or the Cannabis Regulation Commission hearing. So that one, like if you were to apply for it today, it could be a year and a half to 2 years from now when you're required to do your Cannabis Regulation Commission hearing. It just depends on how slow or fast you move through the process, right? So if you were to start today, I'd say a year and a half from now, you might be meeting with the Cannabis Regulation Commission. If you hold a temporary approval, or you're in the process of receiving a temporary approval, the last day for a temporary approval license to be in effect is December 31st, 2027. So at some point before December 31st, 2027, you will have to have transitioned to an annual license. And at the end of the annual license transition process is when you'll have your Cannabis Regulation Commission hearing.
Great. And then a little bit more kind of maybe back on the previous question. How long should my presentation be for my public hearing?
So for the public hearing with the Cannabis Regulation Committee, you're allotted 10 minutes to present. And for your neighborhood council, it's case by case. It depends on your neighborhood council and how they conduct their meetings and how much time they'll allot to your application presentation. So you'll have to check with your local neighborhood council in terms of how long you have to make your presentation. I would recommend that you say 10 minutes. You ask for 10 minutes so that you can use a similar presentation for both the neighborhood council and the Cannabis Regulation Commission hearing. You're not required to make slides, but you definitely are going to need to make an oral presentation. Okay.
Yeah, and that's all of the questions that were submitted. I think the presentation and the information is pretty straightforward. Something that everyone's going to have to prepare for and you know, prepare, practice, and research, right? And get that you know, get that kind of dialed in, so to speak, right? Any closing comments or feedback before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think obviously outreach is important to your neighborhood council prior to the required meeting. Attending a Cannabis Regulation Commission meeting and possibly a hearing if you're not the first one in line would be really helpful. But just, you know, if you get to the place where you have the DCR recommending approval of your application, I think you're in a good spot, right? If you've done this outreach and you've got DCR recommending approval, I think the odds are in your favor, and I wish you the best of luck.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Thank you, Courtney, for all that information. I want to thank Commissioner Ahn for his you know, sharing of the and clarifying as well. Thank you both for the informative presentation. And thank you all for attending this informative webinar offered by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation. The webinar was recorded and will be found on DCR's learning management system for social equity verified individuals within a few weeks after this presentation. If you have any questions or need any additional clarification on accessing your account, please email dcr.scp@lacity.org. I want to thank everyone again for joining us and have a wonderful evening.